Oh, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Blaine Rushak. I'm president of the PhD Project, and we are very excited that you're able to join us today for the next in a great series of webinars, focusing on DEI, which is at the heart of all the work we do every day. Tonight's webinar focuses on the Great Resignation. Now, to some, that might mean employees moving around within their profession. For others, it might mean trying a entirely new career path. Now, I will say the PhD project is a contributor to the Great Resignation, but in a different way. Let me explain. The PhD project for 27 years has basically been encouraging Black and African American, Hispanic and Latinx, and Native Americans, professionals, successful professionals, to leave their jobs, go get a PhD, and become role models and mentors, leaders on campuses, and to making a difference on the university campus. Once again, the sole purpose being to create a more diverse workforce. Our mission goes to that strategy about creating the more diverse workforce together. So we have a lot of partners in this, people who are members, who are partners, and our work is not done. We started this 27 years ago, and since then have increased the population of underrepresented minority faculty to 1,400, which sounds great. We have almost 300 students in the pipeline, which is amazing, but it's still not enough. There's a lot more work to be done. As you know, the demographics of the student populations continue to increase, especially in the Hispanic and African American populations. So we need to maintain that momentum and make sure that that gap gets closed, not increased. We do have this amazing group of faculty that are on campus making a difference every day with students, with other faculty, with their communities, and that's through their teaching and their research. So hopefully you'll learn more about the PhD project by going to our website. We call that impact of the students being attracted to schools that have diverse faculty the role model effect. We've actually been doing some data analytics on this to show that there is a very high correlation to diverse students being attracted to schools that have diverse faculty. So we know that we're doing the right thing with our mission and heading in the right direction. Now, today's panel is an amazing panel. They are going to speak to you about this topic. We have with us Dr. Kurt Heissenbuttel from Fidelity, which is one of our PhD project partners. He's on our board. We have Dr. Yuvay Ferguson from Howard University. I think we've all heard of Howard, and John Ferguson from NASCAR. And if you look on the screens, you'll see their names are spelled exactly alike, and that's because they're married, which is fantastic. So welcome to our panelists. I'd also like to point out that they're going to be talking about this topic of the changing environment, what companies can do to attract and retain talent. So while we're talking about the Great Resignation, we're also going to talk about how you keep talented employees. And Dr. Ferguson specifically is going to share information about how onboarding can make a difference, as well as one of my favorite topics, talking about millennials and Gen Z. A quick just update on the PhD project. If you're interested, either yourself or someone who might be interested in pursuing this amazing opportunity to become a PhD in business and teach, please go to our website. Our upcoming conference in November, while we closed the application deadline officially because of this webinar, we've opened it back up. So if you are interested, please go to our website and apply as soon as possible. At that conference, if you attend, you'll learn about what it is to get a PhD in business, what it's not. You'll network with professionals from the university reps, from other students and peers. So it's an amazing, uplifting, motivational opportunity. And finally, I'd like to thank our partners. We have a number on the call today or on the webinar from AACSB, the accrediting body, KPMG, from Moss Adams and Lincoln, and I'm sure others, as well as we have Kurt from our board on today's session. Remember that if you become a member or partner of the PhD project, that gives you access to all 1,400 of those faculties like Yuvay out there at our schools. They can help you find talent for your organizations, not only experience hire, not only campus, but experience hire talent as well. So if you're interested in learning more about how to become a partner, once again, go to our website, contact me directly or Marie Zauer. We'd love to talk about how you can contribute to enhancing our mission and doing even more as we go forward. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the amazing and dynamic Sasha Thompson from the Equity Equation. Sasha, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Blaine. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone that's with us today. Blaine did an amazing job just kind of setting the stage for us in our conversation. I am so excited about this particular topic. And for anyone that has been a part of this series, you know that about a year ago, I decided to leave my job and do my own thing. And so I came from tech, so I'll say I was an early adopter of the Great Resignation, right? And so when I think back into why I decided to leave, I'm seeing so much of that now in the data and so much of that in the conversations that are happening across all industries, right? It's not just hitting tech, it's hitting every single industry. And so, what we're going to do today is really unpack a lot of this. So, I'm really excited to have this conversation with Yuvay, John, and Kurt, because I think, from their perspectives, we can start looking at what this really means and how we can shift it from the great resignation to the great recruitment or the great opportunity, because there's so many great nuggets in there that everyone can kind of take away from this time. And so, what I want to do is give a little bit more background on what is the Great Resignation, because I think there's so many folks that aren't quite sure what it is. You're hearing the phrase. And so it was actually coined in 2019 by Professor Anthony Klotz at Texas A&M. And he defined it as a voluntary exodus of the workplace, right? There was really no definition of why people were leaving, but he was noticing that there was this decisions being made like, I just need to go. Right. And so that could be going to another company. That could be starting your own company. That could just be, I want to be at home and take care of my family. So there were so many different reasons why people were leaving. And so when you start looking at some of the data, it talks about people are looking for more flexibility in where to work or how to work, better work conditions, better pay, less toxicity, right? Are some of the top reasons. Anecdotally, what we're also noticing is that it was impacting marginalized communities more so than any other group, right? So women were the ones that are kind of opting out. People of color were opting out. And so that actually ran counter to all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that have been happening over the last 18 to 20 months. And so what we're going to do today is really unpack a lot of this and see how can all of the DEI activities and efforts that have been put in place be used as a framework to continue to hold people in, right? Instead of losing them, how can you use that to kind of shift and look at ways to retain that talent? So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. All right, so Yuvay, can you tell us about yourself? And one of the things that I know as we were talking was you actually made the shift from corporate to the PhD a while ago. But talk to us a little bit about what was some behind some of the decision to do that.
So, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Yuvay Meyers Ferguson, and I am currently the Assistant Dean for Impact and Engagement at Howard University School of Business. And I worked in advertising for a few years, and I was looking for a balance of life and work, a better balance. And I reached out to one of my mentors and former professors at Howard University, Dr. Jerome Williams, and he introduced the PhD project as an option and life-changing decision. And this was pre-pandemic, but life balance is really important. And I think that this pandemic has shown us that it's more important now than ever. And so I took that journey and took that. We went to the University of Texas at Austin for my PhD. And in my current role, I'm helping to marry partners with innovative ways to engage with students. And as these companies are engaging with students, I'm definitely seeing right now what it looks like to be engaging in the hiring practices in this new environment that we're living in.
Thank you so much. So, Kurt, I want to switch gears over to you because financial services tends to be a very steady area. And so just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and some of the issues that you're managing at Fidelity as it relates to the Great Resignation.
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. And thank you, everybody, for being with us. Really appreciate it. I just want to say, as a doctoral grad myself, like I have a really keen appreciation for the work that the PhD project does, and the work that the organization as a whole is doing on behalf of doctoral students and graduates across the U.S. And couldn't be more excited about the organization. I did the complete opposite of what Yuvay did. I went from academia to corporate, so I kind of did the inverse. But my role now at Fidelity is to lead the development needs of all of our internal associates. And I've done a number of different things across the organization, both on the university recruiting side, a lot of work in the diversity space, and now focused on the growth and development of our internal associates. But specifically to your question, Sasha, like we are not immune to the issues of resignation. You know, every employer certainly faces those challenges. However, I think we're in a bit of a unique position because we are currently focused on hiring thousands of associates, but it's largely related to the growth and investment that we're making in key areas of the business. And so that's more of our response than it is as a response to the resignation. So we've seen really significant growth given the market conditions, given the changes in the global economy, that are all driven to support kind of our customers and clients. And just to give you an example, over the past 18 months, our client engagement has been truly unprecedented. It's the best word. We've seen significant growth in every aspect of our business, and more investors are turning to Fidelity. So for example, we experienced roughly 154% increase in average daily trade volumes from 2017 to 2020. And so these customer trends, combined with kind of our commitment to providing industry-leading service, are really the predominant drivers for us right now in that increased hiring. That is all said, we still face the same challenges that every organization does about both attracting, retaining, and making sure that we're creating kind of an enriching environment for all of our associates.
Thank you, Kurt. And John, so some of us, when we think about sports, we don't think about the business side of things, right? We think about the athletes, we think about the talent, we think about what we see on television. So from your perspective, how is the Great Resignation impacting the industry?
Thank you for the question. And, you know, in our world, it's the drivers that everyone is focused on here at NASCAR. And I think the biggest impact that we've seen, I like to start off with this, you know, the Great Resignation is a byproduct of everyone grieving. The pandemic, social justice movement, life as we knew it stopped. And so in that moment, we all probably didn't know what to call it, but we were collectively grieving as a world. And so in those grieving moments, you get quiet, you sit still, you listen to that inner voice, those moments of your life where you thought you should have done this and you didn't. And then you start realizing, you know what, I'm ready to take that risk. I'm ready to take that leap. And I think that has been universal for all industries. And so in sports is a place where I think a lot of people find their home very quickly in their career, because it's a lot of times for the employees that work there, it's a passion. It's their home team, it's their hometown league, whatever that case may be. So there's a lot of passion associated with it. And so I think sometimes when you look at the sports landscape, it has been a good shakeup in some ways, because we were directly hit by the pandemic. We are a live in-person environment. So when you're unable to do that, and then from the business side, when you have to make some of those decisions as a result of not being able to maintain or run your business, some people were put in those uncomfortable places either by their own grief of life as they knew it stopping, or by a business decision. But what I've seen on the other side of that is that a lot of people have been able to find the silver lining in it all. And they have found phenomenal opportunities that I have to say, if they didn't get that sort of shift or nudge in one direction or the other, they never would have possibly gone after it in the manner in which they did if we didn't get this place of being uncomfortable. I'm a firm believer that when we are uncomfortable, It is just that we are on the edge of something new happening in our life. And so that's sort of how I look at it in sports. I've seen a lot of people get phenomenal opportunities. And as we were prepping for this, I didn't consider myself a member of the Great Resignation, because I always looked at it through the lens of people who left their job to be entrepreneurs, to do something outside of traditional workspace. But in some other conversations, maybe I am a part of the Great Resignation, because in that same moment, there's a lot of opportunities for growth and development, a lot of opportunities to stretch yourself. And in sports, traditionally, there's been the senior guard, the old guard, that sort of prevented you from elevating to other levels or other positions in an organization. So it's been really exciting. And I think it's all about perspective and how you want to approach the opportunity that's in front of us. And those of us that may not be resigning, it's a lot of opportunity for you to pivot internal to your organization and really excel.
Thank you. And so I want to go back a little bit. I do want to ask the audience, if you have questions, please feel free, put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A section. We're going to try to pull those in as we're having the conversation today, because I want to make sure that we're hearing from you and this is a dynamic discussion. The other thing that I wanted to point out too is there were a couple of statistics that I wanted to share that I skipped over, just again to do some of this level setting and before we go into the next set of questions. So between April and June of 2021, 11.5 million people quit their jobs, right? So that was not, moving into a different role within the organization. That was just leaving the organization. In August of 2021, 4.3 million left their jobs, which was the greatest number so far that we have statistics on, right? We haven't seen the September numbers yet. And so if a survey of over 30,000 people conducted by Microsoft, 41% of employees consider leaving. 54% were focused of those, 54 specifically focused on Gen Z, right? So when you take Gen Z, 54% of that generation is looking to leave, right? Or starting to look to leave. Gallup found that 48% of people are actively searching for new opportunities, and that could be inside or outside of their organizations. And then according to a LinkedIn survey, and this ties right into what John was just saying, 74% of people have indicated that the time at home caused them to rethink their work situations, right? So again, it's that time to just sit and ponder and figure out. I know for me, it was, how much more of this can I take? And is it worth it? And no, it's not. So, what else can I do? And you start to look at your skills and what you are passionate about, right? You start to really realign to those things. So John, I want to go back to you. And you started talking about this just a little bit, but when we look at the statistics that I just cited, it seems that employees are making some extraordinary asks, right? Their work-life balance that we talked about, psychological safety has come up in some places, fair payment. What can companies do to ensure that employees feel valued so that they don't walk away?
Great question. I think we have to really put on our listening hat and not be so caught up in trying to figure out what the next company is doing, but look insular to our company, because we all have different DNAs and different fabrics of how we got to present day. And I think what I continue to hear is a major calling for flexibility, and flexibility that is not within a particular framework. But I think the challenge there for organization is that there has to be some type of framework, because that's just how the Industrial Revolution has happened. There has to be some parameters. And so I think it's going to be a big mind switch for both parties. And I think both parties, employer and employees, need to be prepared to put in some work here, because I think as a management group, we need to listen, and we have to start figuring out, how do we flip this business model to be solely outcome based? And then we have to figure out our comfort level with getting there and what stakeholders are involved in us getting there, because the old guard is still here. And the naysayers may not be as loud anymore because the pandemic showed us that we could make this work. But there's also been these heavy capital investments in beautiful offices that companies own. So there's that balance. But I think what employers need to do right now is listen and be open to the flex, be open to the pivot. And my biggest thing is let's try. Because if it doesn't work, we tried it. And then I can go back to my fellow colleagues and say, we tried it. It just did not work. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, as employees, the ball is in your court. I would encourage you to do what is best for you in your personal situation. But I would encourage you not to make a short-sighted or emotional response there, because as all of these things are shifting, there could be new doors and new opportunities opening up for you right in front of you. So just be mindful of that. But I think what people are really wanting is flexibility. Not that I can be remote and work these 2 days from home. I just want general flexibility. I had a colleague that I was talking to the other day and said they looked at a job description and said 75% of the role needed to be conducted because it was 100% remote, but on the Eastern time zone. And so I thought about that as a general framework. Okay, 75% of your work needs to be conducted in this framework. Again, it's hard to get away from a framework, but in this framework, and that gives you the autonomy to manage that other 25% or whatever ratio you want to do. So that's what I think. Employers need to listen and recognize that we don't know it all. And it's not about the dollars and cents always. It's not about this one day off. It's about the whole human approach. And I think we really want to get to the core of it before we start trying to throw out solutions.
Thank you. And that's a great transition into my next question. Because Kurt, when we spoke, you talked about there is no one solution to this, right? There's just so many ways that you can try to approach this. And John touched on quite a bit of that. So can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Totally. And I couldn't agree with John more. I think it's really important as an organization, you can't just hear what your people are saying, you have to listen to what they're saying. And you need to make sure that the solutions that you're designing are meeting those needs and are offering real help. And I think that's a really big piece of this. You've got to look holistically at kind of what your employee needs are, and you have to constantly be reevaluating what you're offering them so that you can make sure you're meeting them where they're at. And as an example, we just increased our student loan assistant benefit from $10,000 to $15,000. We looked at our parental leave program, and we've increased our parental leave for those that are going out on leave. We've introduced a work from home benefit. We've introduced a range of benefits as a result of COVID that increased flexibility, that gives support for caregivers and finding and paying for care providers. We've introduced emotional well-being support for our associates and their family members. And so it's really about trying to kind of give this range of options that gives people the ability to pick and choose what's important to them. At the end of the day, we have to remember that we're talking about people. And everyone has unique experiences, challenges, circumstances. And as an organization, we have to do our best to build solutions that allow our associates to tap into resources that best meet their unique needs. And it's that kind of thinking that's going to keep associates engaged. It's going to keep them energized about what they do. And to John's earlier point, it's not always about kind of that flexibility in the biggest kind of most traditional term of flexibility, but it's about providing solutions to folks so that they can tap into resources that are relevant to them.
Thank you. And one of the questions that came in the chat actually ties into something John said. And so I want to open this up to the group to respond to. So it says, in your opinion, what does the Great Resignation mean in terms of a shift in power dynamics from those who traditionally held it toward those who didn't traditionally have it? So if anyone wants to jump in on that one.
I can sort of chime in. And so it's a shift in the power dynamics. I think, it's kind of like the housing market. It's a seller's market right now. And so there is an opportunity for employees to really have a larger space. And I think we traditionally have looked at it. But when I look at it, it's a 50-50 partnership here. Whenever there's tension or conflict, we both own 50%. So I would implore all employees, don't just come with this doesn't work, come with solutions, or hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm hearing. Be a partner in the space. That gives you great visibility in trying to help solve one of the biggest challenges facing everyone working. But third, in order for me to listen, you have to be comfortable enough to express and tell me what's going on, how this impacts you, what you've learned. So there has to be a level of openness. And I know not all environments are as welcoming to that, or maybe past experiences, you just don't feel as comfortable, but we have to figure out how can we have that conversation. And that doesn't have to be a town hall. That could be a heart-to-heart with a peer or a manager or someone in your organization, because that is where we get to the root cause. And it's just like any relationship. If we're not communicating, we're not able to progress beyond the situation that we're in today. And so I think there has been a bit of a switch in the power dynamics. But I do think that the dollar and cents will still have a leverage in this conversation. And I don't know how sustainable it will be for us to go into every place of business and see hiring size. At some point, that won't go on. I don't know when it won't, but I don't think it will be sustainable, because that's just how we work to live and provide for our families. And so either there's going to be a big uptick in entrepreneurship, or there's going to be a resurgence of people re-entering the workplace. But I think the biggest thing is, what are we doing with our time now? How are we maximizing this moment? Because we have the opportunity to change what has been done for status quo forever. And I think we really want to be intentional and capitalize on the moment.
I'm not sure it's a complete shift in the power dynamic. I think, there's environmental factors that have forced organizations to have to think differently about how work gets done. And that fundamental change is going to change the way that both employees engage at work and the way that organizations engage with their employees to accomplish what we're trying to achieve. And so I think it's really largely kind of put on the shoulders of the forcing factor, and that being COVID in this situation, that has really required organizations to completely kind of re-engineer how we think about work. Nothing in our lifetime has forced us to do that yet. Work has always been this construct of 9 to 5 in an office, and that is something that has had to change as a result of COVID. And I think that's requiring both the employee to think differently about what is important to them and what are the things in their life that they need. And then it requires the employer to say, how do we create space for that to happen at the same time that we can achieve the goals and objectives as an organization that we're trying to do?
I think one curveball in all of this, and I'd love to hear Yuvay's perspective when we look at generational impact. The youngest generation is, okay, that's where they're harnessing their power. So there is being a bit of a shift, because you might have a whole group of people, you know what, we're done. Y'all want to walk out together today? Cool. And so that there's a different mentality from baby boomer to this new group entering the workforce. And I think and information is traveling faster. So I'd be curious to hear what Yuvay has to say.
I was just going to say, that is exactly where I was pivoting to next, right? Because, as we've been talking about this, and as in the work that I do a workshop on generational diversity. And at first, the conversation was more around like inclusive communication between the generations. And it's shifted now, because a lot of kind of what John and Kurt's talking about, these are the folks that are opting out. These are the folks that are saying, I don't want to work like my mom and dad did, right? I don't mind skipping from job to job to get the experience that I want. And so in the work that you're doing now at Howard, what are you seeing? How is this playing out? Or what are they saying to you? What are the companies saying to you as they're looking for this talent?
Gen Z, which is the youngest generation in the workforce right now, they are taking notes. They have been watching and taking notes and seeing what previous generations experience in the workforce. And this is their time to shine, because as a generation, they have a very culturally specific attribute that they are tightly aligned with their own value set. Meaning a company that comes in that doesn't align with their values, it doesn't matter how much money you're willing to pay them, they are going to choose their own values in alignment with those values over everything else. Their values do include quality of life. And they saw that you can be worked, from day in to day out, and then be let go. But from, we had the 2008, we had a big crash, and they saw their parents be forced out of positions or let go, or however you want to put it. And so this group is very clear on what they're looking for in the workforce. And so they are holding companies' feet to the fire. They are looking for value alignment. They are looking for quality of life. They're looking for flexibility and transparency in decision making. Even though they are entry level, they are looking for this level of transparency that no previous group has really demanded before. And so they are willing to take jobs that it used to be easier for companies just to throw salary at here goes money. And they right now are finding that, there needs to be this total package. And I'm actually very proud to say that they are kind of leading this. Although we all had to shut down, Gen Z's fervor about demanding quality of life has kind of inspired a lot of the other generations to kind of follow suit. We're looking at trying to find ways to listen to our passion and reimagine yourself and what you could be doing to impact the space that you want to own as a career. And, they're really showing this. They're showing employers that this is what they need and what they're going to demand in the future workforce.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we talk about in that workshop. And it's like, how can each generation learn from the others? Because it's not this very divided thing, right? There are opportunities for everyone to learn from each other, regardless of where they are in the space. And the other thing that I've learned about this particular generation is they have high expectations when it comes to diversity and inclusion, right? Like they've grown up in the most multicultural and diverse world, in a global world. These are the folks that were basically raised on technology. So they've been well connected from day one. And so over the last, 18 to 20 months, so many companies have increased their D&I efforts. And again, this generation is looking at, okay, so what are you doing around diversity and inclusion? Like that's one of the questions that they're asking of organizations. And oddly enough, many of these organizations are still stuttering to come up with an answer because they've just now started their efforts. And so as companies are looking at, okay, we're dealing with this great resignation, we're looking at ways to figure out how to hold on to this talent. How can organizations lean into or tap into the work they're already doing around diversity and inclusion during this time, right? Because Kurt, you kind of talked about it. They've had to shift already. And, one of the statistics that has come out is the individuals with disabilities are now having more access to jobs because there were organizations that said, oh, no, you can't work from home. Well, guess what? You can work from home now. And so it's opening up opportunities there. So if anyone can just kind of chime in on that.
Yeah, I think if an organization is looking at the last 18 to 20 months from a D&I perspective and looking at it as this moment in time versus thinking about it as a sustained investment in advancing diversity and inclusion across their organization, they're missing the mark.
Yep.
And you have to look at this from a sustained, intentional investment in your organization, or you're just not pointed in the right direction. I never thought in my lifetime that we would have open, honest conversations about race in the workplace, ever. And I think to Yuvay's point, it's those earlier generations that are driving that need for those conversations to happen. And that's the kind of stuff you want to see bring it through training, education, whether that's for managers or our organizations itself. I think the big thing for D&I is you have to make sure that it's embedded deeply in every corner of your business, and not as I said at the beginning, think about this as just a moment in time.
It's going beyond the checkbox, right, and making it a part of the DNA. Yep, John.
I always think about it like this: it's making a cake, and there's been times. Okay, making a cake is a chemical process. You know, you need to measure specifically, but if you make that cake and you realize after you baked it, you forgot to put sugar in it. I don't know about you guys. If you ever made a cake, if it's not sugar, it's now cornbread. And so you look at that cake and you say, this cornbread, how can I make this a cake? Maybe I put a little sugar on top, a little honey. Guess what? It didn't go through the chemical process. So it's always going to be cornbread. And so your D&I strategy has to be baked into what you are doing. And if you unfortunately have that cornbread, it's time to throw it out and we got to start over. One of the comments said that the younger generation is acting on the activism, or their activism is reaping the benefits of what other generations want. And I think that's very true, because what we saw in a pandemic was people hitting the streets and letting their voice be heard. What we had never seen was that done in a global pandemic. And so just the power of technology, the power of this younger generation of saying, you know what, this is what I want, and I'm not settling in that. Everyone is going to benefit from that. But it's also generational change. You know, when I finished college and was entering the workplace, I believe I was sort of raised that you don't talk about politics, religion, or how much you make it work. This group will tell you all of that on the first day. How much do you get paid? They will tell you real quick, this is what I make. So in all of that, like, there's an exchange of information, but they have more comfort in talking about topics. Some of us were sort of raised in like, this isn't the space or the place to talk about that. But as we want to grow and continue to evolve as organizations, as a society, and start baking in that sugar and making sure it's baked into our DNA, we got to start having those conversations.
I love that analogy. And, you know, it's absolutely spot on that there's certain things that folks were like trained to not talk about. And I think that's where a big part of the rub is happening within a lot of these organizations. Well, you know, HR told us not to talk about those things, or you could be sent to HR for talking about those things. And then now HR is the one leading the conversations. So there's this, cognitive dissonance that's taking place of, okay, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to say? And so it's, how do you teach people the chemistry behind the cake baking?
That's tough, though. I'm not gonna lie. That's been a work in progress for me to want to talk about some things that may be close to the chest. And so I'm always telling folks, you have to secure your oxygen mask first, because when we're doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, we as the individual are our greatest tool in doing that work. You are dealing with resistance, you're dealing with systems. So you have to first take care of yourself. And so I implore everyone in HR, any people leader in the pandemic, you had to secure your own oxygen mask, because while we're trying to motivate teams, we're trying to motivate organizations, we are at home grieving ourselves.
Yep.
You know, and so it's really important that we take that into consideration. But I believe in lowering the waterline, because if I come out the gate and I'm just leading in my truth and what my pain points are, and this is who I am, you will naturally open up in response. It's just like if someone came to you and said, hey, let me tell you a secret, you're more inclined to say, let me tell you my secret. And that's how we start having those genuine dialogues.
Yeah, it's connecting at that human level. Yeah, thank you. You know, so I want to do a little bit of a pivot, because, you know, so much of the conversation has been around recruiting specifically. And we've touched on some of this as well, but I want to talk about the opportunity to retain talent through promotion, you know, through other processes. And so what can organizations do right now to kind of really focus on that retention piece? And Yuvay, if you want to start with that, and then we can kind of go around.
the thing I'm seeing from students as they're reconsidering their career path is that they feel unheard and that they feel like there's not a lot of people who look like them up the ladder that they can rely on and feel safe and having transparent conversations with. So from my viewpoint, I think that one of the things that companies can do to really help to retain their talent is to create this pathway and an avenue for especially younger, earlier in their career employees to really be able to talk out their ideas, get across their ideas, their frustrations even, and really just feel like there's a communication way or pathway for them to be able to express themselves.
It's a career, creating a career path. Because I was talking to a client earlier this week and she said, I feel like all my jobs have been special projects, right? And just kind of hopped around, but there was really no clear path. So making sure that there's a path. So thank you. Kurt, John?
Yeah, I mean, recruiting's always going to be an important part of the equation. Let's not like gloss over that. That's always going to be important, but retention matters. Paying attention to attrition matters. And so I think, for example, organizations have to think about, I'll pick on us as an example. We're trending towards, 60,000 employees by the end of the year. And our focus has to be, how do we create opportunities for our associates to move across the organization? As an organization as large as we are, you can have a new job without ever leaving. You can have a variety of different experiences, opportunities, and growth within the same organization that can stimulate the kind of energy that someone brings when they start a new career. And so you can have a new career without ever stepping outside of the organization that you're in. And so employers that think about that as a premise really allows them to say, how can we structurally design programs, processes, and experiences that move our talent through the organization in a way that gets them excited and energized about where they are. At the same time, I think you have to be really intentional about building a really deliberate learning plan so that growth can happen inside your own walls. And so that's about intentional skill building that's both good for the business, but also good for the individual as they think about that Rolodex of skills that they can then port and use as they think about their own personal development. And so those are two things for me that I think become important as you think about how are we going to support the retention piece.
John.
I agree with everything that has been said. And I think, I'm always looking at it from the 50-50 lens. I think employees have control of their professional development. And I think I oftentimes hear there's the dependence on, well, my manager or the company's not doing X, Y, and Z. And so I want to make sure that everyone recognizes you are in the driver's seat there. And I think there's a lot of opportunities that you can create for yourself. And because everyone at your level or your peer group, that's your competition. So look at how you can excel, pass, lap them as you are trying to grow and get exposure throughout the conversation. But if you just come in and do your job, that is no longer the growth mechanism. You have to show that you can be more dynamic, versatile in your skill set, and also have relationships that are sort of beyond just right there in front of you. So there's a level of social network and just networking, socializing and networking that comes along with it. And employers do have a responsibility here too, but I don't want anyone to enter a system that may not be as sophisticated with professional development and feel like, oh, well, I can't progress here. No, you can, and you may even be able to do it faster in that type of engagement because they're not looking for you to have checked XYZ box off.
You just tapped on something that is one of my passion points around networking, right? Because I think so many of us do not understand or know how to network well, or even what our network is. And I mean, I do a whole workshop on that around, it's not just who you work with, right? It's who you go to church with and your sorority and fraternity and, all of these other organizations that you're a part of. And how do you really leverage that to help you on that path, right, that you've designed? So, yes, John, that was all the things right there that I always talk about. I'm looking at the chat too, and, just some of the comments as we were talking around, diversity and inclusion. One of the points that Matthew made was examining the systems, right? And so I think it's important, and we didn't touch on it, but I think it is an underlying current of what has been said. Is not just awareness, right? It's not just having the workshops and doing those things, but how do you also shift and change the systems that are causing the inequities? And so, Kurt, I think you gave some great examples of specific programs that do that you're targeting very specific groups because you know that that's, underrepresented within your organization. So I just wanted to point that out. So as we're kind of coming up on time, there are a couple more questions that I have. And so one, and John, I'm going to kind of go back to you for this, was, we've been talking about what employees are asking for right now. Are they asking for too much?
I think it depends on who's asking. I think I've seen some that maybe their skill set isn't as deep as maybe they think it is. And I think there's a level of self-awareness that needs to come along with every ask that is made. And I also believe that the younger generation that's coming up wants things to happen quick and instantaneously. They don't sometimes take feedback well. I've been in that position. You get defensive, and I say you should look at feedback as a gift, because there's so many people leaders who will not provide it and just see you fail. So when you do get it, process it. Don't be so quick to respond. I always think the great response is, thank you so much for the feedback today. Let me take some time and just process this. Can we have a follow-up conversation later in the week? That gives you time to remove the emotion from it, think about what the feedback was, and then figure out what parts of that you should act on, because it allows you to grow and get better.
John, every day, feedback's a gift, and every day is your birthday. Like that, you have to approach it from that mindset. Couldn't agree with you.
Yes. So that's what I would say. I think it depends on who's asking. I think some people don't have deep enough roots in either their role or their organization to come in and command something. I think we see it with some of the roles that people are applying for. You apply for entry-level jobs and you must be remote. Help me help you.
Yeah. And you just said something. I was like, Kurt, it reminded me of our conversation around just skills, right? Or people looking for roles. And so if you could just bring that back up.
Yeah, I think so often, we focus on degree equals X, or experience equals Y. And I think if you divorce yourself from the degree, and don't get me wrong, degrees are incredibly valuable. I've got a couple of them, and I wouldn't minimize that at all. But you want to focus on what are the skills I gained through that experience, and how does that skill translate to value to an organization? And if you can move yourself to this frame of skills-based thinking, it allows both the organization to say, what skills do I need to do this job? And how do those skills need to manifest themselves in the workplace? And then from the individual to say, here's what I think I need in order to get to X, Y, Z, or wherever I think I'm headed on my career. And what are the skills, experiences, et cetera, that are going to augment that and help me get to that place? It completely changes the conversation. And I think it becomes a really important way for both, whether that's students, employees, or the employer themselves, to think about how do you ready the organization. And I think the challenge that we have as a society is, like, we're really good about focusing on the skills we have today. The hard part is thinking about the skills we need 5-10 years from now. And many of them are unknown to us. And so how do you, as an individual, and I think John's point around 50-50 becomes really important here, but how do you as an individual come into an organization and say, I'm going to be a learner, not a knower. And I'm going to continually focus on how do I learn and develop myself so that I can bring new skills to the organization, because I don't even know what I'm going to need 10 years from now. And so if I focus on that kind of learning mentality, you're going to be so well positioned for growth in your career.
I think that's a great transition to Yuvay around, you're with the students, right? You're with folks that are kind of making the decisions around if they're going to reshuffle, resign, relive, like they don't know what they're doing right now. And so what are some of the things that you would want them to think about, right, as they're kind of going into these workforces that John and Kurt have talked about?
I have to go back to your point about networking. That is the key. And so my advice to students or anybody who is considering making a change in their career is to think about your network. They're going to be able to open doors and provide insight that you will find invaluable in this process. So even if you're thinking about getting a PhD, you're going to leave your job and get a PhD, the PhD project network is an invaluable tool for that process, right? Or if you're thinking about changing and going into something, a new industry, like let's say you're interested in going into sports, doing networking and really just relying on the people that are in your sphere will help that process and make the transition a lot more seamless. And you'll get some insight that you may be jumping from the pan to the fire, right? So just thinking about who is in your sphere that can provide insight is going to be key.
Thank you. And so I want to leave you all with this last question. And this is kind of how I end all of our webinars here. So if there were 2 or 3 nuggets that people watching today could walk away with, what would those things be? So Yuvay, want to start with you, and then we'll kind of work our way around.
The one piece of advice I would make sure that I would want people to walk away with is just understanding the landscape. So really thinking about what is the scenario that I'm operating in, and then trying to figure out a path that makes sense in that environment. And oftentimes we have ideas about where we see ourselves, and it doesn't always align with what is actually happening. We talked about, your skill set. Do you have a clear understanding of what your skill set is and what you're truly offering? What is the landscape that you're going into? What is the work environment that you're looking for, that you're desiring? And really understanding, is that possible, given your skill set, given the work environment, given the industries you're interested in? So being able to take a step back and look at your environment is the one thing that I would hope that people would walk away with from this conversation.
Thank you. John?
That's a tough one. I think it comes down to something that's been a model for me that sort of happened organically, and it's just closed mouths don't get fed. And so that's a notion of, make the ask, but I think there's a balance of making sure you're doing the work. And know that this stop on this journey isn't your final destination. And so just keep going for what you're looking to achieve. And don't settle in a place of discomfort or non-happiness if that's just not where you want to be. But I say be willing to put in the work to get to where you want to be, because when I think about the younger generation being so quick to leave, I think it's just the speed in which information is traveling. This phone right here, I can do so much from this phone. The other generations didn't have this luxury. I could start a business from this phone. I can, launch an Instagram and YouTube account and start getting paid from this phone. And so there's so much opportunity that's in front of us. So closed mouths don't get fed, and never stop, never settle. Go for your dreams, reach for it, and make it happen. But know that it will take work.
Thank you. Kurt?
I think from the organization side, the thing that's coming to mind for me is you have to take care of your talent. And so whatever that means, whether it's through benefits, through learning, through development, through growth, you've got to take care of the talent that you have. And something that we've certainly underlined a point on here is you've got to make D&I part of every piece of your organization. You've got to embed it into your strategy, not as an aside from your strategy. And so, make sure that that's the kind of anchor. I think from the employee side, from a D&I perspective, this is something that I feel really firmly about is, every employee has a role in this space. And it's not good enough just to talk about your commitment. You need to model it. You need to demonstrate it, and you need to show it through your actions. And so I think every one of us have a role to play in the work that we're doing there. And that includes every employee across the organization. And then just what we said earlier, focus on growing your skills, be a lifelong learner. It's super important. And if you approach your career from that perspective, you're going to go places.
Thank you. It's, as y'all were talking, a couple of things came to my mind in kind of a summary. It's definitely value your employees, right? Regardless of what level they are, and know that you are invested in their success. And I say that, either there or elsewhere, but you're invested in their success. But the flip side of that, and I think John and you've talked about this a little bit, it's even before you get to the networking and the other piece, it's like, what is your purpose statement? Like, what is your purpose? And I think once people could kind of hone in on, okay, this is my purpose, this is my life calling, then start to put a plan together, then you see how the jobs kind of fit into that and the skills that you need fit into that. And so that's where the networking come in. Who in my network can help me get those skills? Who in my network can help me get in front of the right people? And so it's really just taking that time as you're reflecting and saying, okay, it's ready. I'm ready to resign. Are you really ready to resign? Are you looking to shift? And so it's really questioning the why behind all of it. I want to just thank you all for this conversation, because I think there were so many different pieces that we talked about. I know when we were planning for this, we were like, what direction are we going to, where can we go? But I think that, it is really is based on, it's happening so quickly. There's so many moving parts, and they're all intertwined. And so it's just, how do you make sure that people feel valued, feel seen, but then also are honest with themselves and what they want and what they need in this process. And companies kind of doing the same, right? Like, what we still have a bottom line, but what can we do to ensure that we can do this with the human approach? So I want to thank my panelists for this evening, Dr. Yuvay Ferguson, John Ferguson, Dr. Kurt Heissenbuttel, and the PhD Project for your continued sponsorship of this series. And so just wish you all a good evening, good afternoon, and we will see you next time. Thank you.